This is the Real Estate Investing Abundance Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. I know you're excited to get into today's show, but I have a very exciting announcement to share with you before moving to the show. We've just launched a complimentary and comprehensive webinar that, among other things, shows you how to legally use passive real estate investing to reduce your taxes, recession-proof your nest egg, and take the sting out of inflation. If you are curious to learn more, go to stevetucker.com/webinar. It is complimentary and only takes a couple of minutes of your time. Once again, that is stevetucker.com/webinar. I'll see you in the webinar. Enjoy today's show. Hello, enlightened investors. This is the Real Estate Investing Abundance Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Allen Lomax. And what a delight to be back with you again today. We're going to look at a different segment of investing than what we typically do. We're going to look at how we can unlock the secrets to building a thriving laundromat business. And with us is Jordan Berry. He is the host of the Laundromat Resource Podcast, where he teaches us how laundromats can help people achieve financial freedom fast. So, Jordan, take us into the show. Share a moment that helped you to be the person you are today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Glad to be here. Feels like a big honor, so I appreciate that. You mentioned that right before we jumped on here, and I was kind of thinking, okay, what was something that was formative? And the first thing that popped into my mind is kind of a funny one. I didn't really expect it, but it was in junior high, and it was the first junior high dance that we had, and a girl asked me to go to this dance. And I, number one, wasn't really sure about girls yet, and number two, if I wasn't sure I wanted to go with that girl. And I had told my mom, that she asked me, and my mom sat me down and said, hey, look, it took a lot of courage for her to ask you to that dance. Do you have somebody else in mind you want to take? And I said, no, not really. And she said, well, why don't you go with her, and make her feel special. Everybody deserves to feel special. And I just, for whatever reason, that really stuck with me, and it's kind of guided my path as I interact with other people, and just trying to recognize, hey, you know what, this person is special or has some value, to them, and treat them accordingly. So, yeah.
What a lesson your mother taught you at that point in time. And we forget that a lot of times, but everybody is special in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's right.
And can bring something to the table. And Jordan, you certainly have something special here to offer us today in terms of helping us to look at an alternative type of investment. Well, first of all, just define to us what you are talking about in terms of laundromats, because there really is quite an array of what we find in terms of laundromats. Some laundromats are strictly coin-operated, totally and completely mom and pop operated. Others are associated with dry cleaners and provide an extensive array of services. So define for us what it is. What are we talking about when we're talking about laundromats?
Yeah. So generally, when I talk about laundromats, I'm talking about self-serve laundry, drop-off laundry, and pickup and delivery laundry. And that may or may not include dry cleaning services. And, traditionally for a long time, laundromats have been, coin operated, self-serve businesses, hands off mostly. And now we're starting to see an evolution of the service side of the business also, with drop-off services and pickup and delivery. And, the recent events, world events have really accelerated that, especially the pickup and delivery side of the business. So that's generally what we're talking about. Not as much dry clean specific, but, like you said, a lot of dry cleaners and laundromats they're married at the hip.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start off with what are the benefits for owning laundromats?
Here's what I like about laundromats. So I own laundromats. I also a real estate investor and love real estate. I'd say probably real estate's my first love. However, one of the big benefits of laundromats is that they are a cash flowing business. And when I started getting into real estate investing, the message was cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. And if you get enough cash flow, you can, leave your 9 to 5, you have financial freedom. And I was like, awesome. And so I started, making plans and working towards that plan. And I started realizing, man, if I'm getting like $150, $200 a door, how many doors do I have to get? It started to get really overwhelming really fast, and happened to get into laundromats. And what I then learned about laundromats is that the average laundromat, just the average deal, unleveraged, you're looking at a 20 to 25% return on your money. So that's before
unleveraged?
unleveraged.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So they're valued on a multiple, which is, the average multiple right now is about a 4 to 5 multiple of the net income.
Wow.
And so, so unleveraged. And then obviously when you apply leverage to that number can go up from there. And
Obviously.
so that piques a lot of people's interest, right? And
For sure, yeah.
so that's obviously a huge benefit.
Mhm.
The other benefit, which can be a downside. So I mentioned laundromats have been touted as passive income, hands off. And listen, whenever you deal with a lot of people, whenever you deal with a lot of machines, you're going to have problems, right? So they're not hands off in terms of stocks and stuff like that might be hands off. Even real estate might be a little more hands off than laundromats, but laundromats are one of the most hands off businesses that I know of, especially for the cash flow. And they operate on a lot of flex time, right? You can go when you want. You don't have to be there to be making money. It's that sort of making money while you sleep time. So that flex time is another really huge benefit. And, there's lots of other benefits too, like you can make a big difference in the community that you're in. It's one of the last remaining community gathering spots, which is a pretty cool thing. And, there's tax advantages to owning laundromats too. So yeah, lots of benefits there.
When you're talking about this 25% cash on cash unleveraged, does this include owning the property, or is this a laundromat in a rented facility?
Yeah, great question. So my favorite thing, I think laundromats and real estate marry together really, really well. Because, since laundromats are valued at a 4 to 5 times multiple, which is like a 20 to 25 cap, right? They don't appreciate as quickly as real estate might. That might be, an 8 or 10 cap or a 4 cap, depending on where you're at and what kind of real estate you're at, right? So when you marry those two together, I think that can be like a superpower, and you can super accelerate your wealth that way. But to answer your question, that is the laundromat only. And it doesn't really matter if you own the property or not, because you should be setting it up to where you're assigning a rent to your property, even if you own the property. So that's the laundromat specifically. And if you're buying the package deal, the real estate and the laundromat, then you're going to want to value each of those separately. And the way you do that is you're going to assign a rent, like a average market rent or something like that to it. So,
Sure,
but most of the time, especially in bigger cities, you're leasing the space.
Well, you just mentioned cities, and so another question I have is, where's the ultimate best location for a laundromat? Is it urban or is it rural communities that are most beneficial?
Yeah, well, the answer to that question is the answer to just about every question. It depends, right? It really does depend. There's pluses and minuses to both, right? Usually the city, obviously, there's going to be more people there. They're going to be highly concentrated, dense, population, but there's going to be more competition there also, not only to attract more of those people, but also to put downward pressure on pricing, and those kinds of things. And, when you're out in the suburbs or in rural areas, there's not going to be as dense of a population of people, but you're probably going to have less competition. There's probably not going to be a whole lot of price pressure. So your volume may be a little bit lower, but your pricing might be higher. So it really does depend on location. And I would say, laundromats too are very location dependent, like real estate, maybe even more so than real estate.
In terms of, you said they're not a passive investment, typically speaking. What are the headaches? You mentioned people and machinery. Take us through some of the details of those.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. And when I say they're not passive, I mean, I think when you buy a laundromat, if you buy an existing laundromat, depending on how much work you have to do, you may have to do a little more up front. Once you get it kind of humming, I mean, you're looking at maybe 5, maybe 10 hours a week. So just to kind of give a ballpark there. So, I mean, headaches can come in the form of machines that break down with people's clothes in them. It can come in the form of vandalism. If you're in a bigger city, so like my laundromats are in LA, there's a issue with, people trying to sleep in the laundromat or shower in the bathrooms, things like that can pop up. But the other thing that I've found is that there's a lot of great people too, and it's easy for attention to get overwhelmed by the few, people who are causing issues. But by and far, most people, even in rougher neighborhoods, are great people. So, but you deal with things like vandalism, broken machines, people needing a refund, stuff like that.
Well, in terms of machines, what kind of mechanical issues do you run into?
Well, it depends, right? So there's a lot of laundromats, we call them zombie mats, right? That are out there that are, half the machines are down, half the lights work. Seems kind of dingy. You might see a cockroach, those kinds. There's a lot of those kind of laundromats out there right now. And typically they have older machines. And so they're going to have, issues with belts and door locks. And sometimes the boards go bad. The electric boards go bad and, things like that. Newer machines, they've solved a lot of those problems. Obviously there's still going to be issues that come up and things are going to break down, but a lot of that stuff is plug and play, and a lot of, the newer machines now can be worked on by mechanics. And so it's been a long narrative in this industry that if you can't work on your own machines, you can't make money. And that's just not true, especially now where there's more options for that. So yeah, so there's issues that come up with door lock still or belts or, that need to be changed but there's maintenance schedules out there that help kind of keep things running smoothly.
Keep them running. So in terms of the maintenance, you say that there are people who are ready and willing to do that. Are they specially trained, or are they just your average handyman is able to handle those kind of things?
I'd say there's a little bit of both. Most of the people are at least have some experience with commercial washers and dryers. But I mean, the machines aren't that complicated, so somebody who's, pretty savvy in appliance repairs can probably translate a lot of those skills to commercial washers and dryers.
I would think specialists would be rare in your rural communities. And so you're going to have to rely upon somebody with general knowledge there, I would expect. Well, in terms of the zombie laundromats that are out there, when you go into purchasing zombie laundromats, would that be is that a good move investment-wise? Does that potentially add more value, like oftentimes it does in the multifamily space? If you can find dilapidated apartments, your value add opportunities are much greater than if you purchase a totally and completely renovated or brand new complex. Is that kind of the same equation equivalent in the laundromat business?
Well, I don't want to keep giving you the same answer, but I'm going to. It depends on that one. But here's what it depends on, right? Is the big question to ask is, why is this laundromat a zombie mat, right? Is it being mismanaged? Were the owners undercapitalized when they bought it? Have they just not, kept up with reinvesting in the business, or has population shifted, or has a new competitor come in? Right. And so depending on your answers to those questions, like if a new competitor's in, you're in for an uphill battle, potentially. Right. If it's just being mismanaged and people are like, whoa, this is the closest one to my house, but if I just go a few miles down the road, I can go to one that's going to be significantly nicer. Well, you can probably win those customers back. Right. So the big question is, why is it in the condition it's in? And developing a game plan to kind of turn that its destiny around.
Enlightened investors, if you haven't done so already, be sure and click that like button and also click that share so others can take advantage of the content. And finally, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our upcoming episodes. So if you were to purchase a zombie laundromat, what would be your first endeavors, your first task to turn that around?
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, you want the place to be clean and all the machines to be working, right? And all the lights to be working. So I'd be working on that. Now, that might look like replacing all the machines, or that might look like getting a mechanic in there and getting all the machines up and running.
Mm-hmm.
It might mean replacing some of the machines, but not all the machines, right? But I am looking to do a deep clean, probably putting fresh paint on the wall, maybe redoing the flooring, making sure all the machines are working, getting, probably LED lights in there because they probably don't have LED lights in there, making the place feel bright, clean, safe. If there's no camera system in there, I'm probably putting a camera system in there just so people are feeling safe and secure. And, you got to think about your typical laundromat customer, right? It's probably a mom with her kids or, and you want that to be a place where a mom feels safe to bring her kids and do her laundry, right? And so keeping it bright, keeping it clean, keeping it, safe. And then I'm going to be looking at pricing, because a lot of times those zombie mats, in order to sort of compensate for their lack of cleanliness and functionality, they have low prices. And I'm probably going to look towards getting pricing up towards market pricing and just providing a better service. And then I'll probably start an advertising campaign, which typically in this industry has not been something that owners have done. It's kind of been a field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. And now it's a little more competitive because there's newer, nicer laundromats coming in, and people are seeing it more as a quote unquote real business. And so since they're seeing it as a real business, they're treating it that way. And so advertising actually is still low hanging fruit in our industry. Not that many people are doing it, but more and more are.
So what does a marketing campaign entail in this business?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of different things. I mean, obviously there's online marketing, which is like Google ads, Facebook ads, maybe Instagram ads, getting in front of people who are in your community who need the services, right? And a little bit it's gonna depend on what your business model is, right? So if you're a self-serve laundromat, you're gonna run ads differently than if you also offer pickup and delivery, right? Those are two different demographics of customers. So you're going to run different ads and different types of ads, probably offering some sort of promotion early on. It also sort of depends on if you're a cash business still, or if you're a digital payment, card or app payment. You can do a lot more promotions when you have a digital payment system than you can with a cash system, which is getting more and more common in the business. So I mean, online ads, flyers, in-store promotions, things like that.
Well, in terms of the digital versus the cash, would you convert an entire laundromat to digital, or are you going to leave space for cash? Or is there still a need for cash machines?
Yeah, well, it depends. So it does depend a little bit on your demographic. Some stores I would just immediately put in a card payment or digital payment system, and not have cash at all. One of the big burdens of owning laundromats, if you can call it a burden, is that you got to go in, once, twice a week to collect quarters, and then you got to count the quarters, and then you got to refill your change machines and all that stuff. And when you have a digital payment system, you don't have to do any of that anymore. And it's a little more self-managing. You can manage it a little more remotely with that. So, but some demographics and some communities, you want to have a cash option too. And you can offer both. The machines can offer a digital payment and a coin option, payment option. So
is the digital payment, is it pretty reliable these days? I mean, gas stations have been doing this for a long time, but it seems like the vending industry has been slow to adapt to that, and I'm just utilizing various different vending
Yeah.
machines, there have always been a lot of headaches with that. How is that in the laundromat business?
Yeah, well, I'd say the systems are good now. They're reliable, they're good. The data you can get from them is significantly more valuable than the minuscule data you can get from collecting cash.
Mhm.
And they seem to be reliable. They have backup, redundancy backup. So like if your internet goes down, you can still accept payment, stuff like that. So yeah, I think one of the reasons vending and laundromats have been slow to adapt to digital payment systems because one of the draws has been that they are cash businesses.
Mhm.
And so people didn't necessarily want a paper trail of what money's coming in. But like I said,
Mhm.
the industry is evolving right now and it's changing a lot. And there's more savvy investors and more savvy business owners coming into this industry and recognizing, you know what, we don't need to skim off the top, or we don't need to do those things in order to actually have a super profitable business.
Mhm.
And we actually lose some of the tax advantages. We lose some of the value on the back end when we want to sell, when you're not keeping good books.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, Jordan, share with us what you have to offer and how it is that we can take advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I run laundromatresource.com. You can check that out if you're interested in laundromats. It's we have a podcast where I interview laundromat owners and other industry professionals. It's a surprisingly popular podcast for a little laundromat podcast. And we have a YouTube channel and a blog, and we have a free course actually you can go check out at laundromatresource.com/courses on how to buy your first laundromat. So you can go there and it's just a 3-lesson course on the basics of how to find a laundromat for sale, how to value it, and then how to do your due diligence, which is super important for a laundromat. Like I said, they're cash businesses and books typically aren't that great. So that due diligence is really important. So you can go check that out over there. Or you can email me at Jordan, Jordan, at laundromatresource.com.
Well, Jordan, is this a one-man show or one-woman show, or are there JV opportunities or syndication opportunities in this industry?
Yeah, there's not many, but I do have an investment group called Diligence Capital Investments, and we invest in laundromats and strip centers. And yeah, you can check that out. Feel free to send me an email and ask about Diligence Capital Investments if you're interested in doing a laundromat deal with us, but you don't want to run it.
Okie doke. Well, Jordan, what has been your biggest challenge and perhaps your biggest setback in terms of owning and operating laundromats? And how'd you come through that? And what was the big lesson learned from that?
Yeah. So the reason I started all this is because my journey into laundromats was not a good one.
Mhm.
So I bought my first laundromat and it was a zombie mat, and I came in and I retooled it, all new equipment, remodeled it and everything. And the guy who sold me, the distributor sold me the equipment, and the broker who sold me the laundromat told me, "Hey, just do this stuff and people will show up and you'll be making boatloads of money." Well, I ended up losing like $2,000 a month for 18 months.
Wow.
It was very stressful, very difficult, and I couldn't find anyone to help me through that situation. I didn't know what I was doing wrong.
Mm.
And, there's a lot of stats out there like laundromats succeed 95% of the time. And I could not figure out why I was in the 5% that wasn't succeeding.
Yeah.
And so eventually kind of clawed my way out of that through, it wasn't hands off. So I had to be a lot more hands on for a little while. I had to talk to more customers. I had to try some different advertising methods. And it was just a little bit of grit to just kind of get through that. And eventually I decided, you know what, I paid a lot of money and a lot of sweat and blood and tears to learn these lessons. And so I'll share them with other people. So that's where Laundromat Resource started. And the big lessons are, and I feel even to this day a little embarrassed that this is one of the big lessons because this seems obvious, but I relied solely on the broker, and you never want to rely
Mhm.
solely on someone whose paycheck depends on you buying a deal.
Mhm.
Right. And so that was a big mistake. And then the other one was I did not in my financial model, I did not plan on losing a bunch of money for a while. Nobody talked to me about a ramp up period from buying a zombie mat and getting customers back in. And so I'd say I was undercapitalized, underprepared for that. And it caused me to actually not invest in my business probably the way I should have early on, because I sort of turtled up. I got scared. I was like, I thought I was gonna be making money, I'm losing money. I don't want to spend more money because I already have money going out. And I think that prolonged the pain there for me. So
what were the contributing factors to the fact that it was not operating as you wanted it to? And also, I'm also suspecting you overpaid for it in the first place. And perhaps did you over renovate? What were some of the contributing factors there?
Yeah, I didn't really overpay and I didn't really over renovate, but it takes time, right? And one of the big lessons that I learned is it's a lot easier to rehab a laundromat than it is to rehab the reputation of the laundromat, right? It was known as a zombie mat. It was known as cockroaches and dirty and dark. And so the community had to get to know the new laundromat, right? And had to get to know me as the new owner and how I was operating things. And that it took time. And so when I would like run ads, people would be like, oh, I know that laundromat, I'm not going there. And so it was a big kind of monumental effort for me that I didn't do right away because they told me I didn't have to. And so, 6 months down the line, I was like, oh, like nobody knew's coming. So I need to be more proactive about this. So I think that was the big thing, is that the community had already known. The laundromat had been there for like 50 years, but the previous owner just ran it into the ground.
And obviously the clientele had other options. So,
right.
So you had to bring it up to a competitive level to get that back. And changing reputation, it can be very, very difficult, to be sure of that. Well, Jordan, any last words for us?
No, I mean, I think, one thing I would say is, if you're listening to this and you are in a position where you're like, I am looking for cash flow, maybe you're trying to exit your 9-to-5 as quickly as possible or something like that, I think laundromats are worth looking into. It's not for everybody, but for the people that it works really well. And like I said, that cash flow, because you're getting 20 to 25% on return on your money unleveraged, that cash flow accumulates quickly and actually allows you to be able to achieve that financial freedom faster than a lot of other methods a lot of times. So yeah, and I appreciate you having me on and, changing gears a little bit and talking laundromats. And it's always fun for me to talk to real estate investors in particular, because I consider myself one, about laundromats. So I appreciate that.
Well, Jordan, very informative conversation. It's been a pleasure having you. Thanks for enlightening us about laundromat industry and investments. Thanks for being with us today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Enlightened investors, wait, don't go just yet. I just want to remind you about our recently launched webinar that you will not want to miss. If you're at all curious and would like to learn more about how real estate investing can diversify your investment portfolio, alleviate the anxiety associated with Wall Street swings, leverage your 401ks and IRAs to substantially increase the return on your investment, and do all of this with turnkey, hands-off, passive real estate investments, then you'll want to immediately go to stevetalker.com/webinar. In the webinar, we'll also address the common dubious investment schemes that you want to avoid. To access the webinar, go to stevetalker.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you in the webinar.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Seed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at seedtalker.com.